My dad was Mel Stewart, and my mom was Florence Woodhouse. Dad was from Meadow, and Mom was from Beaver. So I come from a wonderful pioneer family. My great-great-grandfather was named William Stewart, and he and his wife joined the church in Scotland and came to America in the early 1850s. And then they came across the plains. They were in the Hodgett Wagon Company that followed the Martin and Willie Handcart Company. And on the way, his wife and 2 children died in Wyoming, and they were buried there. And they settled in Millard County, Meadow, which is about 100 miles up the road from here. And William had a son. His name was James. And James married 2 sisters, and he had 18 children from the 2 wives. And that's where my grandfather comes from. My father was Mel Stewart, and he grew up there in Meadow and on the farm. And my mother, she was from Beaver, and my parents met at BYU. And my dad was a barber by profession, and they moved down to California. And that's where I was born, in East LA. I hate to admit it, but yeah, I was born in California. So we moved up here to Cedar when I was about 12, and so Cedar's been home ever since then. My dad, he was a great storyteller, and he used to always say, there's 2 people that you can never fool. One is yourself and the other is God. And he used to say, the gospel's true, my boy. And I used to always hear that. When I became a father, all of a sudden life became a lot more serious. I now had more mouths to feed, so I had to focus on getting an education and making a living. And as a father, you have to be on your toes. You got to be careful about what you say around little children, because they pick up on things pretty fast. And but it was a great experience being a father. It was humbling and challenging. When I was in about 7th grade, my dad said, hey, why don't you become a dentist? I think that'd be a good job for you. So I always enjoyed the science classes in school. One of my good friend's brother was going to dental school at the time, and so he used to come home for the summers, and he used to tell me how great it was, and I believed him. And dentistry was my first choice. Being a pilot in the military was my second choice. I got into dental school, so I forgot about the military. So I went to dental school at Northwestern University. It's in Chicago. And after I graduated from dental school, we moved to Alaska. And I was practicing there for about 20 years. And thoroughly enjoyed it. Jan didn't like it. So I figured I didn't want to be a bachelor in Alaska forever, so I came back to Utah and been working back here ever since. I started working for the Paiute Indians. They have a clinic in Richfield and Cedar, St. George, and so I run the dental clinic in Richfield. So my faith journey is pretty boring because when my parents told me that the Book of Mormon was true, and Joseph Smith saw Heavenly Father and Jesus, I didn't have a hard time believing it. I guess I've always been active in the church. I've always gone to church. I read the Book of Mormon when I was a young boy, and I never had a problem with it. Served a mission, taught the gospel to a lot of people, and to me the gospel just rang true from the start. So I got accepted to 2 dental schools. One was in Chicago, the other was St. Louis. And so I flew back to Chicago, and it was a couple of days before Christmas. and most of the students were gone. But the dental school was still open and the clinic was still open, and so one of the senior dental students took me around and showed me the school. And I remember looking out over the city and wondering where I should go. And the Spirit said, "This is where you need to be." And so I enrolled in the school there. And the next year, that's where I met Jan. I guess maybe how to be a little more patient at home with children growing up. And it would have been nice to retire at 40. I didn't figure out how to do that. I would like to be remembered as a guy that liked to have fun, enjoyed life, didn't swear too much, and always tried to help other people that were poor or less fortunate than me. Always tried to help the poor and the needy. Probably the biggest one is flying. I've owned several airplanes. I've flown from Cedar to Alaska several times. I've got about 900 hours of flying time. So yeah, I enjoy flying. Yeah, I own a Cessna 185. It holds 6 people. Hunting. I did a lot of hunting when I was in Alaska. I took most of the big game animals that they have up there. So I enjoyed hunting.
Can you be specific?
So I shot a grizzly bear, a moose, a caribou, a wolf, a Sitka blacktail, and a Dall sheep. And beagle dogs. I enjoy raising beagle dogs. So that comes with the story. So when I was a little kid, Mom used to make bologna sandwiches for me every day for school lunch. And so ever since then, I still like bologna sandwiches every day for lunch. And that's what I eat. A bologna sandwich is followed by a snowball for dessert. Wherever home is, that's my favorite place. And my second favorite place is Meadow, where my dad grew up. I spent a lot of time there as a kid, hauling hay in the summer and feeding cows. And to me, that was the celestial kingdom when I was a kid growing up. So I'm not the most read guy in the world, but one book that I enjoyed reading, I think everybody should read it, by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. D&C 82:10. I, the Lord, am bound when you do what I say, but when you do not what I say, you have no promise. So, when I was just about to turn 12, we were living in Las Vegas at the time, and somebody from church called up my mom and says, "We don't have anybody that can play the piano for priesthood." And my mom was an accomplished piano player, and she had given me lessons for a couple years. And so she made me practice How Firm a Foundation for the whole week before I turned 12. And so the first Sunday that I went to priesthood, they made me play How Firm a Foundation in front of all these old geezers, and I was scared to death. But I played the How Firm a Foundation, and that's been my favorite song ever since.
We were in the Logan Square ward in Chicago. He was going to dental school, and I was there working, managing, I think it was a county seat store, like a Levi store or something. We were asked to give talks on the same day in church. And so I said, well, why don't you come over, I'll make us dinner. And we can eat, and then we can work on our talks together. And he blessed the food. When he said that prayer, it was so amazing to me because I grew up in a family that weren't members, and I never heard anybody pray like that in my life. I mean, he actually sounded like he was having a conversation with his Heavenly Father. And that, I just remember getting this feeling like, wow, you know, how do you talk to Heavenly Father like that, you know? And that is one thing that I have always loved about Alan, is when he prays, you can hear him, it's coming from his heart. And that, I mean, besides his good looks, that was the first thing that attracted me to him. So his dad worked for Howard Hughes, and for years. And first he was his personal barber. Anyway, so we were dating, and we were sitting on the couch, and he was telling me the story about his dad, that he worked for Howard Hughes, and I was like, yeah, right. I didn't believe a word of it. And then after Hughes didn't want his hair cut anymore, then he was kind of like his personal nurse. But that's something about Alan. So he used to, as a young kid, they traveled to Bahamas, and wherever Hughes went, you know, the family got to go places because of that.